Well, you will know now. Yes, sir. Yeah, this thing is little. It's not centered. Okay.
If a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody to hear it, does it make a sound? You don't have to answer that.
Never know. God may hear it.
I wonder if you would talk a little bit more about the breathing, that bandha, whatever, the exercise. And I think I heard you say something about. Well, I'll let you explain why we do it.
Oh, this. She's referring to for our friends online to a yogic exercise called uddiyana bandha, in which we suck up the diaphragm into the rib cage somehow, and all the digestive organs are also lifted as a result of their being attached in part to the diaphragm. This yogic exercise and many others that we do, other than a pure physiological aspect of strengthening some muscles and kind of massaging the digestive organs and a few other physiological benefits which I'm not an expert on. The main goal is to break patterns of samsara's egoic patterns of behavior, of contractions. These psychological or psychologically induced contraction of fear and desire, or of aggression and protection, involve many muscles. They involve chains of muscles. And they become, these contractions, chronic and almost subconscious. They just show up a little bit on the surface as an ill-defined sense of lack, for instance, or anxiety, or aggressivity, impatience, these type of manifestations. So these exercises require to isolate muscles that are part of those chains. And as we try to isolate these muscles, one from the other. For instance, to contract one while the other one is relaxed. Whereas in the chain, they are both contracting simultaneously. Then if we try to use this exercise, we are going to have to break the chain. Are you following me? The chain will break, and in order to break the chain, the psychological content of the charge that was involved in this connection of the two how do you call maillons, the two in a chain, the components, the two links. The two links now have to act independently from one another, and as a result, the psychological charge that was involved in this connection gets released. So in the example that we did today, we were dealing with very central organs and muscles that are involved in anxiety, fear, etc., because they are involved in the breathing process. So the two, usually in fear, there are tensions in the diaphragm and also tension in the intercostal muscles. So in this exercise, we were trying to reach an independence between the two. In this exercise, the idea to perform it properly, the intercostal muscles are active because they enlarge the rib cage, which has the effect of which is to suck up the diaphragm into the rib cage. And the diaphragm, to be sucked up easily, has to be relaxed. It has to be just like the hands. So it is shaken by the other. If I do this, the muscles in my arm are shaking my hand, which is so. Any chain that would connect the muscles that move the arms with the muscles that move the hand would be broken by this exercise. That's an example. You see, if I can do this exercise, I have to have an independence between this and this. Yeah. Of course, in the hands and in the arms, there is no much psychological involvement, but in these muscles that are used for breathing, there is a big psychological involvement. So, and we add to that, and in this exercise, this breaking of the chain is achieved when we can do it in a quick repetition. Because if the two act together, you cannot have this type of thing. You see? So if you can do it fast like that, it's only because then the two links have been made independent from one another.
Eventually breaks that chain of fear and desire.
Yeah, it's a little bit like doing this, this type of thing. If you can do this, you break some chains. The idea of the Hatha Yoga, the entire idea of the Hatha Yoga was that if you are acutely aware of all the organs, of all the muscles in your body, then it is very difficult for psychologically related contractions to be there. You see? Because you spot them out.
Yeah, right in the middle of playing, I realize that I'm doing this. The solar plexus, all of this down here. I have to constantly be relaxing that.
It might be something different you're talking about here.
That's why I was relating it to fear.
Because there is
anxiety.
another aspect also I was mentioning earlier on, which is the abdominal muscles. And there are other exercises, such as an exercise called Noli, that will contribute to the independence of the abdominal muscles versus the thoracic muscles. And during this exercise, you will make sure that all the muscles in the head are relaxed, that they are not involved. So we add this how do you say it? This de-linking or whatever, de-linkage.
Actually, afterwards, it was a tiny bit of pain. Just, after having done.
You have to do it carefully. You don't want to. You want to go progressively because it shakes organs. So it may. In the beginning, they are not used to it. They have made their little niche, and they forget that when the body was younger, there was all this flexibility. So you have to be careful in the beginning.
A long time ago. That opens a parenthesis on Hatha Yoga. I mean, there are many paths to the same realization, and the path of, Hatha Yoga is typically in two parts. Hatha Yoga, the first part, and Raja Yoga, which is the second stage. And of course, these bandhas are part of the first stage of the Hatha Yoga part. And then the second part of Raja Yoga is really the same thing as the visualization we use here. The transparency, they call it differently, they call it a pralaya, which means dissolution. So basically it's a dissolution of the body in the space, and then dhyana, which is the meditation, which is the last stage of Raja Yoga. And what is often misunderstood about the Hatha Yoga is to take it as a gymnastic, as gymnastics, as effort, whereas in fact it's more intimate knowledge of the body. Intimate knowledge of the body, so that the body becomes really an object. If you know the body completely, it means the body is completely in front of you, like a landscape. And when that happens, you are automatically the witness of the landscape. You are not the landscape. You see, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to. It happens by itself. The moment you objectify the body, meaning you de-subjectify it, it means consciousness gets also disobjectified and resubjectified. The body gets desubjectified and consciousness gets disobjectified. Right? My words are correct in English? Yeah. So all paths eventually lead to the same experience because they come from the same experience. They come from the same vision of sages who have then designed this skillful means to communicate their experience. And the experience which is being communicated is not only a glimpse of truth. That's also something which is misunderstood in contemporary Advaita. It's not solely a glimpse of truth, but it is the peace and the happiness that follow such a glimpse as we liberate the body and the mind of the residues of ignorance. Because a glimpse of truth is not that great if I am still miserable. Another advantage of doing these exercises is this, is that often we have a glimpse of truth, and some people a good grasp of it intellectually. But we fail to apply it in our lives, and as a result we don't enjoy the fruit of our liberation. By doing this, we already apply it to a different area, which is not the area of thought, but which is the area of feeling, perceiving, sensing the body, etc. So already, by doing that, we moved away from the purely intellectual aspect into already applying it to a different realm. And then if we think, and if we feel, and if we perceive in a non-separate way, then chances are we are going to act, move, speak, etc. in a non-separate way.
So this seems very active, very not just in recognizing and saying I'm having a body sensation, whatever that is. Oh well, that's just a body sensation, and relaxing and letting it be, living with it if it's necessary. But actually deconstructing.
Yes, there is
physicality.
Yes, there is a proactive investigation, if you will. All these. Imagine like ignorance is like a ghost that is haunting your house and giving you a lot of insomnia at night, you know. And you get up at night, you turn on the light in your bedroom, there is no ghost. You turn up the light in the living room, there is no ghost. You are tired, you go back to bed. 5 minutes later, you hear these chains. So, then you get up again, and this time you inspect the kitchen also, the bathroom, and but you go back to bed, the same thing happens. You know. It is not until you have inspected the closet, the attic, the basement, the backyard, the front yard, under the porch, all the nooks and crannies of the house, right? That you can go to bed reassured that there is no ghost, and then you will sleep happily thereafter. But so it's a little bit this detailed inspection of the body, you know, is the last one I was referring to. You have a bandwidth problem here with our streaming. This thing is terrible. Our T1 connection is Nobody has is downloading something on their computer right now? No? Yes. Make sure your computer turned off when during satsang, that you are not using some bandwidth. No, unless you are on the internet.
No, and I've done it for the last year.
Well, we need more bandwidth because we are uploading in high definition, so. You're still low. We pay almost $700 a month here to have these two T1s, and we just get very lousy quality. Megapath is the company name.
I guess they're not a sponsor.
In a negative way, they are. Huh? It's better now. Getting better. Still lousy though. Yes, for our friends online, we were having problems with our... No? Leave it on me? Yeah, okay. We were having problems with our upload speed. So I hope it's going to be better now, so we can continue.
Can I just ask one other related question to
Please.
that? Are these exercises similar to the mystery school initiation type exercises, of whatever you might say, the illusion mysteries or Masonic mysteries, or some, where the loosening of the etheric from the physical, or those kind of loosening of the sheaths of the body?
They are very different in that sense that the body is really involved in it. We are dealing with the sensations. It's really down to earth. A lot of these what you call mystery schools use symbols. So it's a different principle. It's more. It goes directly to a less intellectual, more right brain, if you will, a type of understanding. But it still goes through some level of concepts. And here we deal really with a different level.
You said God may hear the tree.
What?
You said God may hear the tree fall, even though there aren't any observers around.
So it was a serious question after all.
It was a serious question. That implies that God might know everything that's happening anywhere in the universe, whether or not there are observers. Does it make any sense to say that?
Yeah, there might be a universal mind, or there might be minds that operate on level of simultaneity instead of on a timeline, on the phase space, the dual space, Fourier transform.
If we imagine a universe that can't support life of any sort, does God still know what's going on in that universe?
You're obsessed with this sustainability of life and the anthropic, what is it called? Anthropic principle.
Right. I'm just interested in what God knows.
Okay. While for our friends online, I've tried to reduce the bit rate here to this time the problem is with us in this transmission. So the image is not going to be as good. I hope there will be less interruption. Okay, let's go ahead.
Francis, this question is about point of view. And in a way, it's a follow-up question from a question Lauren asked yesterday, in which she mentioned that in seeing the love or experiencing love, it was non-local, universal, but the awareness of that was from a particular point of view. And in doing the exercises and working with the tactile body, as I understand, the purpose of the exercises is to more approximate the experience of the body with the experience of our true self, of consciousness. And in doing that, let's say a first step is, I remember one exercise where you said, imagine that the head dissolves. And so without a head, the locus of awareness was located somewhere else in the body. And because awareness, for me and for many people, as you say, is thought to be in the head because that's where the sense organs are, just moving within the body, the locus of awareness to a different point, is liberating in a way. It's also pleasing to the body in a way. And then taking that as a further step, in doing the exercises, then we take the locus of awareness outside of the physical body. So if we're breathing to the left or breathing to the right, or imagining our awareness is behind or above, in that, although that may first start as a visualization, at some point it clicks in, and so there's a feeling of awareness, the locus of awareness, the point of view being outside the physical body, which is also very expansive, which is also very liberating, because we're getting kind of a little bit approximating closer to the feel of what the natural body is. And you could say that doing the exercises, let's say the tactile body has filled up this room, and you can move the awareness to one spot or above and behind and feel the expansiveness of the tactile body, but there's still a point of view from which you're seeing the physical body, the sensations, the other objects. Even in the analogy of looking at bodily sensations, thoughts, sense perceptions as free-floating in space, you can have that feeling of expansiveness, but it's like being in an asteroid belt with all these different asteroids. They're all kind of free-floating together, and you could look at it from standing on one and move to standing on another, but there's still a point of view, even though there's a feeling of expansiveness. Rarely, I think once or twice it's happened for me in doing the exercises, is the experience of having no point of view, which you call the global body, where awareness isn't looking from it's one place, it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And in describing these steps in which the feeling of happiness or liberation as consciousness, as you move from the point of view in a different part of the body to outside of the body, the step that goes to the global experience of the body seems so radically different in degree that it's it's like it's like the awareness becomes atomized, and as it becomes the space, it's just kind of washed in presence and the perfume or the happiness. And the first time that happened, I think I said to you, wow, that was delicious. And you said to me, basically, don't get attached to it. In other words, it was so pleasurable in a way that don't get lost in the sideshow of the sensations, the subtle sensations that are attached with that experience. That's not the heart. That's not the heart of the experience. But most of the time, as Lauren was describing, wherever that point of view may be, awareness seems to be coming from a point of view. And intellectually, I can understand that how can there be a point of view? Because how could awareness be aware of anything else elsewhere? Because elsewhere, the same awareness has to be aware of it, if you know what I mean. There can't, intellectually I can understand that awareness coming from a fixed point of view is an illusion. As of in an experiential way, it's happened very rarely. And I just wanted to ask you two things. In the exercises that we do, is there a progression in the exercises to assist us in dropping more into the global body? And the second thing I would ask you is, again, on an intellectual level, to kind of reinforce and explain why the point of view or the illusion, or that what we think is an experience of having a point of view of awareness is really an illusion.
Well, the mistake, Lauren, and you are making the misinterpretation of your experience, comes in when you say it seems that we are looking from a point of view. That's not your experience. Your experience is that you are looking at a point of view. Because when you are looking from a point of view, you cannot see the point of view. Therefore, you cannot say anything about the point of view. In particular, you cannot say where the point of view is located, because you don't see it. So, if you say, I am looking from a point of view, meaning, for instance, as an example, a location in space, that's not your experience. Your experience is that you are looking at a location in space, because you can speak about it, you can say where it is, so that's where the example, the metaphor of the camera and the security officer in a very different place looking at the monitor, in a different place, possibly at a different time, so in a different space and time, he is the real perceiver. The camera is located, the camera is at a point of view, yes, that's the mind. So, to put it in a nutshell, there is identification or confusion between mind and consciousness. We could say that mind is a point of view through which consciousness watches. But consciousness is never watching from a point of view. It is watching through all points of view simultaneously and creating them simultaneously. So in fact there are no point of views, they are creation of consciousness. You see, even the point of views are not non-existent. There is only one seer. And as long as we have this feeling of looking from a point of view, it means we are identifying with mind and with this point of view. So it is good when that happens to go back to the intellectual understanding, which is not in fact intellectual, because it goes right to the actual experience of consciousness, and the actual experience of consciousness tells you, well, where I am, I'm sorry, there is no localization, there is no time, there is nothing. So it's more than an intellectual experience. It shouldn't be contemptuously ignored or conveniently hidden under the rug. It has to be, it is really experiential in nature, and therefore it deserves our attention. So the actual experience of consciousness doesn't tell us of any point of view from which we look. It can tell us only of points of view at which we look, and through which we seem looking. We seem to be looking. Now, what was the question before?
The first.
Oh, the exercise.
Are there any
No.
particular exercises that would help?
Now, the exercises, it's a different purpose. The purpose of the exercises is to restore the original perception of the body and of the world. So we are dealing with the mind here. We are not dealing with consciousness. We are dealing with mechanisms, habits, that have been inherited from ignorance. And these patterns, we are removing them. And these patterns are an artificially created belief in and feeling of separation between the body and the universe. Whereas to feel the body separate from the universe doesn't make sense, even from the vantage point of Western science. The body is not an isolated system. The system to be taken into consideration is the universe as a whole, right? So, as such, to construe the body as a separate system doesn't make sense. However, we perceive it as such in contradiction, if you will, with our deeper understanding. So, what this is about is to replace these old patterns that we have inherited from years of ignorance. These patterns of perceiving the body as being separate from the world, with no pattern, in fact, with a natural pattern, which is, because the natural pattern is the absence of separation. But in order to achieve this, we use skillful means, which are intermediary steps, in which, through visualization, we replace the current pattern of deep identification with the body with new patterns that are less identified. And in doing this, we in a certain way, to take a celestial mechanics analogy, we escape the gravity potential of those patterns, or at least we move to outer layers, if you will, in which the attraction of these old patterns is much less, so that from this outer layer we could really liberate us from this old pattern. It makes it easier. So it's like if you want to travel from here to Mars, you may first go into orbit around the moon, for instance, and then from there escape. The attraction is, I don't know, 1/10 or the gravity is 1/10 or 1/9, I don't remember. So it will be easier.
And the experience of the global body is still an outer layer.
What I call these are skillful means to go really towards the experience of consciousness. If we take the analogy with higher reasoning, which is that which takes place when we talk about consciousness, if we use the word consciousness, the word consciousness kind of leads us to the experience of consciousness. For instance, if we ask ourselves the question, am I conscious? And we really look, and then, yes, I am conscious. So in a split second, we have to have the experience of consciousness. In other words, the word consciousness, or the question, am I conscious? Or any thought we take about consciousness with this inquisitive mind has somehow this power to lead us to the experience of consciousness. That's at the conceptual level. There is, at the feeling level, an analogous process to higher reasoning. We can call it higher sensing. And in this higher sensing, instead of taking a thought about consciousness, we take a feeling about consciousness, something which is ethereal, transparent, infinitely borderless, etc. And this we replace, so we move from the objects perceived, which are solid, compact, opaque, if you will, to, if you will, the space between these objects. So that's what I call the global sensation of the body. The space that unites all the bodily sensations, because when we talk about our body, we talk about more than bodily sensations, or even than the sum or the set of all bodily sensations. We talk about, what we mean is also whatever it is that unites all these bodily sensations, that glues them together. So this interstitial space between the sensations is what I call the global sensation of the body, because it's everywhere. It is that which holds together all the various components. And this space has these vanishing qualities. So in other words, just as the word consciousness leads us to the experience of consciousness, the consciousness feeling, if you will, which is transparent, vanishing, spacious, infinitely expanded, borderless, luminous, whatever, has also, when we take it, when we try to experience it at the feeling level, also offers us a gate, if you will, to the experience of consciousness, to a glimpse through the sensation. So that explains how these exercises proceed, but the goal, remember, the goal is double. In a sense, on the one hand, they have this propriety to facilitate a glimpse, and on the other hand, in the, if you will, post-glimpse sadhana, they are about realigning the way we perceive the body and the world from a feeling of separation to a feeling of seamless continuity, which is consistent with the world being our real body, if you will. If consciousness is universal, the world is our real body. That's the thing, you see. From the vantage point of science or physics, whatever, this separation doesn't make sense because the body is not an isolated system. From the vantage point of mind, mind is not an isolated system either, since we constantly share information with other mind. We read newspaper, we listen to news, we learn new things, we forget other things. So the mind it's like the internet. It is non-local, right? Information-wise. So then, if at the physical level, at the level of particles, this body is not an isolated system. If at the subtle level, at the level of mind, this mind is not an isolated system either, it would be very strange that there would be a very specific exception for consciousness alone, and that consciousness, differently from everything else, would be separate and private and personal. That which makes sense is that if at the gross level, if at the subtle level there is no separation really, that at the causal or consciousness level there wouldn't be any separation either, that consciousness would be universal also.
Then the experience of the global body may lead to the experience of consciousness, or a glimpse, as you say, but then not necessarily so, because there may be other pathways or other ways in which the experience of in which consciousness is experienced.
Say that again.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is the experience of the global body, which I said rarely, very rarely I've experienced in the exercises, is not a necessary prerequisite to a glimpse or experience of consciousness. There are many other ways that that can come about.
Yes. However, it's a prerequisite to be established in it. And you just said something that you said, although I've not often experienced it during the exercise. The point is that you will rarely experience it during the exercises because the exercises have an artificial quality to them. What they do, they really pave the way to it. And then, not during the exercise, during the rest of the day, you walk in the street or you look at the mountain here, and all of a sudden you feel that the mountain is you. You feel this continuity, that your chest is the mountain, if you will, and the mountain is your chest, and you're surprised. And in hindsight, comparing that with feelings or perceptions you had a few years ago, you say, oh, things have changed drastically. But it is not it is not the experience, and going back to that, it is just a very simple, sweet, peaceful, content experience. It is not the same thing as an experience when you have a glimpse all of a sudden. If you have a huge burden of ignorance, and all of a sudden you are relieved from this burden, you experience a relieved state. This relieved state is not going to last. It would be a mistake to be longing to reproduce this relieved state. That's a mistake some mystics make. They fall in love with the relieved state. But remember, if you want to reproduce the relieved state, you need to take the burden again, right? So you are in the situation of this committed guy who is hammering his head with a hammer, and the psychiatrist comes, why are you doing that? And he said, because when I stop, it feels good.
So, Francis, would another way to say that be that the real body is not in space or time? The real body.
The real body is awareness, you see, the real body. So yes, the real body is not in space or time. The real body is... Yeah. Give me just some moment, I'm going to change again my... We have more bandwidth now. But for our friends online, we're trying to increase the quality.
Hi, Francis. Earlier you were talking about symbols being concepts, and that this breathing exercise was on a different level because it wasn't using concepts. My question is, aren't words concepts?
Yes, but the way it works with this visualization is you hear the words, and these are concepts. And then the words may turn into visual representation inside, which are also concepts, but of a different nature. And then from these images in the mind, then you go into bodily sensations. And that's when you leave the conceptual realm. It's very simple. Let's take an example. If I tell you, feel your throat in this moment. First you hear my words. These are words, right? And then you try to feel your throat. So you will kind of localize your throat in some image you have of your body, but then you will go to some sensations. And you can feel your throat. Then you are no longer in a visualization. You are no longer in a concept. You have, in this moment, I feel my throat. That's a feeling. That's of course, if we stay at the level of words, then we don't do the work, or even at the level of concept. We have really to go along. Some of us, we are kind of, we have a lot of resistance towards knowing our body. So we just, what is said is just words and doesn't make much sense, and we don't really do the exercises.
And so it's not about then getting stuck in that sensation in the body, like not getting attached to that sensation.
No, it's not about that, no. It's about changing somehow the way we perceive the body, to using tools that don't make sense. But after all, if you learn singing, for instance, a singing coach may tell you, feel that the sound goes up in your head and feel that the sound goes even above your head. It doesn't make sense, right? Physically, the sound is not going here. Or even, they may tell you, feel that the breath comes from your feet. Right? come from your feet, so that you are well grounded and feel that you breathe from your feet. Doesn't make sense, you don't breathe from your feet. But if breathing from your feet gives you more support, right? And if singing above your head gives you more resonance, who cares?
This is a perfect prerequisite to my question. And this is actually probably, it may take a while to get this exactly right, articulate it. It's sort of a question for John Klein. I don't know if you're that interested in this as much, because you've said it various times, I'm not an expert in, but if it has to do with what you said to Marie about the somatic chains, a complete and abiding glimpse does not necessarily release any of the somatic chains, or eventually, it's like you say the boulder's in the road, and you have to remove that boulder. And if it's in the post-sadhana or the pre-sadhana, it doesn't even really matter, which is why when people get a sudden glimpse and they have a burden of ignorance, as you say, it's such a big repercussion in the body, it's huge. Like, you know, kriyas and shaking and crazy fevers. I've seen a lot of stuff, particularly in Tony Parsons' group. That being said, if you work in a yogic practice, Raja Yoga, and you're releasing this, you understand that emotion is sensation plus a story, and you're working with your samskaras in your body, or through the purpose of these exercises, then there doesn't seem to be a relationship between whether the glimpse is an idea or a physical realization first. They can happen interchangeably, or they can...
Yes. There are many gates to the kingdom.
Okay.
One may be through bodily sensations, another one through thought, another one through external sense perceptions.
So what you were just saying about the body being not a concept, I think the body is a concept, actually. And I think that's related to what you were telling me yesterday, that thought, perception, and sensation are really the same thing, and they are co-creating at any moment.
Yeah, yes, but we have to put what we say in context. We can say something and later on something that seems in opposition, but in context it is at a certain level everything we perceive is a mentation. But at a different level, a distinction can be made between a thought and a bodily sensation.
Yes, of course. But this is where I'm getting to now, with the notion of illness. The reason why I could no longer practice in Western medicine was, as this became clear to me, what you said about getting apart from the body and looking at it at the very beginning is so essential to healing a physical, quote, ailment. It's beyond essential. It's like the key. And the fact that in Western medicine we approach ourselves as inside and we completely eliminate the point of view is why I saw so many people never healed. And as a matter of fact, it's how I saw many people create illness. And this is not to be woo-woo about it or to blame people for their ideas making their bodies certain ways, but there was no question that if you could get, like even now, if I get a pain, a severe pain, and I become the space in which it's occurring, the pain is like gone. I mean, it unravels so fast.
Not always.
In my experience recently, I've been playing with this a lot.
Yeah,
maybe I haven't gotten the mama pain yet, you know.
It depends on the nature of the pain. Sometimes morphine can help.
Sometimes drugs, morphine, yes. Oh, of course, yeah, sure. Sure, and I know that you had anesthesia with your surgery. You weren't about to go without it. But really, it's the medical model is so messed up. It's so messed up from this point of view of the body being created by
certainly,
perception.
If we remove the burden of ignorance from the body, on the one hand. And then on top of that, if we remove the burden of the residues of ignorance from the body, then the body will be all it can be. But still, the body has its limitation, right? The body will be all it can be, but with limitation. Now, there is something to be added to this, that exceptions to the laws of physics or medicine are still available. But we cannot systematize those. These miracles happen, but there is no recipe that enables, as far as I know, in a predictable way, miracles.
But if you have a child, let's say a child got a glimpse of their true nature at the age of 2, and they didn't have a lifetime of building up these chains, these somatic chains of contractions. You know, fear is not just the diaphragm, it's the entire, it's your nausea, you get nauseated, your hormones are all off, everything. It's your whole body's askew.
Yeah, but still, if this child was born with a chromosomic mistake or error, this child will still be subjected to the problems that go with it. Its chromosomic information is not going to change like that unless a miracle occurs, which is always possible.
So it's God's thought that creates the chromosome, the manifestation. In a way, it's the tree in the forest again.
Exactly. In other words, and also to take a different example, if someone has lost a leg in a car accident, for instance, only on very rare occasion as they are going to grow a new leg and a new foot. You see, that would be big time miracles. So I think we have to be very, very scientific, you know.
But the accident that caused the loss of the foot is part of your body. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's not an isolated. You know when someone's about. I mean, friends have told me they need a break from work and they go off and get in an accident and then they're off work. Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes the connection is so and sometimes it's so diffused you can't find it. But it's all one body, yeah.
Oh, but it's not the body. It's the entire universe. You had an accident because you had what is called toxoplasmosis. Toxoplasmosis. These little parasites in your brain. They want you to die, so that they can go to the next stage of their cycle, and as a result, they make you much more daring as you drive your car. I mean, there are extraordinary statistics that if one has that seemingly benign, unless you are a pregnant woman, seemingly benign illness, I think you are three times more likely to get killed in a car accident. Because the little animals in your brain who seem to be dormant, in fact, they want you to die so that they can escape and reproduce and mate. I mean, they are...
Well, the other thing is that we're all bacteria. I mean, we think we're actually a body, but we're bacteria and viruses beyond anything else. Not only that, it gets turned over every 90 days, so nothing's the same.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely.
Okay. I can go on, but I won't.
I think your question is that in a liberated body will be all it can be, but only that, unless some miracle happens. And miracles sometimes, they just rewrite history. They just take you back in time and they remove the thing and you had the diagnosis of cancer, and then the miracle is that just they made a mistake, They make a mistake, the pathologist took the wrong sample.
Well, that's the third plate in the experiment last night. So all these people in the Advaita circles that go for this understanding but don't deal with their bodies, it's really, on some level, completely misguided. Because
No, it's not completely misguided. It's just not the full enchilada. It's just the first stage, which is already very, very liberating in a sense. I don't know, provided this revelation of the universality of the divine quality of consciousness has taken place. But the second stage of getting established in it is often in neo-Advaita circles not spoken of, and the reason is that if you come from a non-traditional background, meaning you have not had a teacher, and you may think that that's it, that's all there is to it. You say, okay, I'm not happy. Ah well, happiness is not the goal of enlightenment. Truth or reality is the goal of enlightenment, but not happiness. You see, something else is the goal of enlightenment. I don't know what. As far as I'm concerned, doesn't make sense.
And so disease, the definition of disease, is the absence of happiness.
Yeah, it's the absence of ease, right? The ease of being. And in fact, normally the teaching, that which gets communicated in the teaching in a non-verbal way is precisely this ease of being. It is this, that is that which has a deep impact. If you go to someone who tells you, well, I have the recipe for happiness, but the guy is depressed, the first thought is, use it on yourself. Right?
That question was a natural segue to my question. I haven't spoken about this before, but about 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. It came out of the blue. It was a complete surprise. I had a vision of myself as being very healthy, being able to take care of myself, always very competent, all of those kind of things. I had to have surgery, which I'd never had before. My cancer is gone, so I was officially cured. I had to give up my job to somebody else who I knew wasn't going to do it well. That was difficult. All kinds of things about myself just kind of disappeared. It was a stunningly amazing time for me because I had a lot of fear. There were a couple times when I really thought I would die within a few months. Just because of how the information was being conveyed to me from the doctors. Those times were times of just huge openings for me. That was kind of happening periodically anyway, but it just became very intense and prolonged. So during that time, between the diagnosis and when I had surgery, I had an extraordinary amount of fear, but there was always, the fear was in the space of awareness. So that was always accessible, and it was really amazing. After the surgery, and after, a month of drugs and stuff like that, so I was kind of coming back into myself, I found out that I didn't know what that was. Because all of the tricks that I used to keep myself busy didn't work anymore. I mean, I would start doing them and I would see them and it was like, what am I doing? And I no longer thought that I could take care of myself. I no longer thought, even though I've spent time doing meditations on death, the actual experience of thinking you're really going to die was very different. So all of that created this space. But it's been a chaotic space. Sometimes I felt very depressed. I've also found out that my body isn't functioning like it used to. So some of it might be that kind of stuff. I don't know. But I felt, I can be very expansive and feel very connected. And then other times I feel closed in, but not in the same way that I would identify as I would feel closed in before. Everything is just unfamiliar. So in this chaos, when I hear about happiness and dissolving the habits of the body and mind, leading to freedom, I experience some kind of taste of that sometimes, but it's all over the place. It is chaotic. It feels very chaotic to me. I've done a lot of body work to work with my body. So I'm familiar with releasing some of those holding patterns, those habitual ways of being. And I've had teachers who worked with me, pounding me on the head with my habitual psychological patterns. And now it feels very unfamiliar, and I'm just every day kind of get up and wonder what it's going to be like. So in that context, when you speak about happiness, I wonder if I used to always have plans. I was going to do these things to get me to a certain place. I don't know what to do. There's nothing there. I don't know what to do. It doesn't even seem like there's somewhere to be looking to. So it feels chaotic and it feels kind of broken down, and at the same time it feels like a transformational space. So do you have any, can you say something about that?
I think life teaches us in many ways. And that was a big piece of teaching, which is not over yet, in that sense that you have to wait for all the chips to fall into place, you see, and but you'll see that they will fall into place eventually, and that to have gone through this experience, we have told you that yes, there is fear, but at the same time, there is something beyond this fear. And there is a place of peace and and certainty beyond the fear of and the frailty of the human body. In the case of a truth seeker, whatever happens is exactly what you need to go to this happiness I talk about. So it's too early to draw any conclusions from this experience. But it could be said on the one hand that things will go back to normal again, but you will be enriched by this experience because they won't be the same. There will be a knowledge of something else. That you have been there, you have gone through this psychological experience of fear of almost imminent death, and then it's a very valuable experience in life. Many of us have been through that. You're not the only one, and also similar experiences. But life is good, and it will take you to safely to your final destination.
I just wanted to say a corollary, because that is such an exquisite example of the body as a teacher. And when you say being all it can be, it doesn't mean that means it's going to be healthy. It's going to be all it can be, which is what we need. Yeah. It's going to get that stone out of the middle of the road one way or the other.
But in her case, I think it's going to be healthy.
Yes, I mean, yeah, in her case that's true. But not always.
Otherwise, yeah. Well, let's look then online. Okay. Okay. Jeanette asks, number one, I wanted to ask if it is true that once the mind is content and merged totally with consciousness, does one stop dreaming during sleep? I don't know. You can be also content and merge with consciousness during the dream. But the dream is different in that sense that you are behind the dream. And being behind the dream may take two forms. Either you are not in the dream even as a body, and the dream is just like a show that you are watching, or if you are in the dream as a body, at the same time you are the dreamer of all the bodies. So that's the... What is funny, my teacher used to say, oh, you don't dream. Once the mind is content, you don't dream, and you just merge with consciousness, and there is no dreaming. That was true up until one of our friends went into his room, and he was sleeping. He was asleep. And he was going, and he was saying things such as, oh, wonderful, oh. So, number two. And you can have glimpses during the dream, or you can have revelations, or you can have moment of absolute happiness. Number two, how do I encourage my children to keep authentic to this awareness that they are? At the moment, they don't have too many identifications like most people do, but society seems to do a good job of making people more identified as time passes and one's body-mind gets older. The first thing to help your children not to identify with the body would be for you not to identify. So, if you are free, what we say matters much less than what we are. So if you are free, this freedom will communicate itself to them. That's the first piece of advice. Be free yourself. The second piece of advice is, don't answer questions, spiritual questions, they have not put to you. Don't take them to Advaita Sunday school. Don't get them bored with metaphysical consideration on consciousness, and don't buy them books by Francis Lucille or others, whereas in fact they want comics or cartoons or things like that. Instead, do your best to preserve their natural enthusiasm. Children have first to appropriate the world. So it is very normal for children to be interested in objects. They have to do their sadhana in that sense. They have to satisfy their curiosity and to learn how to deal with the world. The engine of this quest for the world is their enthusiasm. Now, once they have owned the world to a satisfactory degree, which is rare in our Western world, if their enthusiasm has been protected and kept alive, then it will turn towards that which is beyond the world and become a spiritual interest. So, number one, before you save others, including your children, save yourself. Number two, preserve their enthusiasm. Follow their enthusiasm instead of trying to guide it. And the consequence of number two is that, yes, our schools, and to a lesser degree in the United States, but they are a catastrophe in that sense of preserving enthusiasm, because the goal of our schools is twofold. It has a capitalistic and a socialist aspect. The socialist aspect is to make our children the servants of the state. And the capitalistic aspect is to make them the servants of the corporations. So my recommendation is to try to make them the servant of themselves. And as a parent, whenever it's possible, to choose a school which goes in this direction, especially with children who are interested in art, in music, and so on. There are very benign schools like that. I remember one of my children, he was playing the violin, and he went to this school in Berkeley, Crowden School, where they had bowing class in the morning, and also they learn how to speak French at the school, and everybody was rather successful then. On top of that, in their education. When he was 12, he had been in this school for 4 years. And then we needed to go back to France for 1 year. And this year, so he knew he was leaving the school. And they had their final concert in June. And he knew he was playing with the kids for the last time. And he just cried his heart out leaving this school. So I think that's the kind of school you want your children to be in. If you remove them from the school, they are miserable, they cry. That's a perfect school. Third question, I was wondering how come when you bring up an example of husband and wife, it is always the wife that cheats on her husband. That's absolutely not true. It is not true that I'll always bring this example, and it is also not true that it is a wife that always cheats on her husband. And when you refer to God, it is always as a she. Yeah, because God always changes her mind. So there is a good reason. You cannot, God is always unpredictable. So, and she adds lots of love and warm greetings to all.
Who is it?
Jeanette. Mary says, I'm not sure I have this right and need clarification. I am hearing again and again that everything arising in awareness is seen as objects of awareness. This includes sense perceptions, visual perception, feelings, etc. Does it consider the physical appearance of other people as objects? Yes. If this is true, then it would also be true that I, referring just to the physical appearance of me, am also just an object arising in another human's awareness and consciousness being the only true connection with other human beings. Yes, your body is just an object arising in awareness. Your body is arising in awareness from various points of view. These points of view are your mind and other people's minds. From your mind's point of view, you perceive the inside of your body. From other minds, meaning you perceive your hunger, your thirst, your pain, your pleasure. From other minds' point of view, when they look at your body, they perceive the external part of your body. So in fact, they don't perceive the same body. You see, there are different perceptions. It's true of any object, but in particular, it is true of the body. So there is not one perception of your body. There are many perceptions of your body. For instance, let's assume people see you, and you are on the sofa, and you are perceiving your body. Then you are tired, you fall asleep on the sofa. You are still perceiving your body, but it's a very different body then. The assumption we make in that case is that as long as we were awake, we were perceiving the same body as the body everybody else was perceiving. However, that as we fall asleep, we are perceiving, the assumption we make is that we are perceiving a different body, which is, I don't know, the butterfly we feel we are in our dream. However, this assumption is not true, because we have never perceived the same body in the first place. It's just that the body we perceive has evolved as we have shifted from the waking state to the dream state. So, it is true, as a result of that, since we don't perceive the same body, that the only real connection, true connection with other human beings is through consciousness and through consciousness alone. For instance, in this moment, as it feels to us as if we were communicating through these words, through the web, through the internet, in our case, through email, etc. It seems that way. It seems that the communication takes place in the world of objects. But not so. The real origin of this seeming communication is in consciousness, which creates all these events in the physical world in a way which is consistent with such a communication in the world taking place. But in fact, because of the fact that we see different bodies, we see different objects, they are all co-created in a consistent way, but they are all co-created in this consistent way by awareness in one single moment. So what we are seeing at all times is awareness and awareness alone. Sherda asks, you have spoken of the perfume or what lingers upon awakening in the morning and on going off to sleep. Is this perfume the same as experiencing the gap? It is being aware of awareness. This experience of being aware of awareness was not brought about by effort, whereas trying to stay with the perfume implies effort. Can you clarify? The short answer is yes, it is the same perfume as the perfume experienced in the gap. In the gap itself, the perfume is absolute. The happiness is absolute because there is nothing else there. It is consciousness experiencing itself. What happens is that as we learn how to keep our stand as awareness, the perfume experienced during the gap lingers after the experience. And also, we experience it before the gap. So that it's like an aura that accompanied the objects just before they find their resolution as pure awareness. And also, in their birthing a state as they just emanate from awareness. So awareness shines not only in the gap, but just before the gap and after the gap. And somehow, the more drastic the shift that takes place in the gap, the more the lingering, or the longer the lingering. So the shift that takes place during the transition between sleep states and waking state is a relatively big shift. And as a result, the perfume of the night in the morning, the perfume of the deep sleep, lingers for a longer period, and it is a door, a gate to meditation, because it is present. All you have to allow is you have to make room for this perfume. Not to go right away into activities, but know that this perfume invites you to do nothing, basically. And of course, this experience of being aware of awareness was not brought about by effort. Another example I sometimes mention about gaps is why do we like taking a trip to an exotic country? It's because there is such a drastic change. And as a result, we feel happiness. You know, we go in this different country and the food is different, the people speak a different language, the weather is different, the taxis are different, they drive on a different side of the street, it rains a lot, it's cold. I don't mention any country today. It begins with an S. Hi, Rupert. And then, at least for a short while, we are happy to be in, we enjoy the change, just for a short while. Then thank you, Felix. Yes, my mistake with the title. Please stop asking questions. We have to wrap it up here. Elizabeth. The questioner said, "I'm just interested in what God knows." Who said that? Who is the knower, And what's God? Also, what does God know? I think we should ask the questioner. Give him give him some advice. God knows only God. So that's what God knows. God knows only God. Second question, who is the knower? God is the knower. And what's God? God is the knower. Third question, what does God know? Only God. Last questions, unasked. I'll make it up. Who is God? Answer. You are that. Last question. No last question. Thank you.